So in this demo, we're going to start coding our parts room demonstration. And I've jumped into coding before I would advise you to do that. And the reason I've done that is to point out some issues that can develop. So we have some problems already with our model and with our code. But let's just assume that we jump in, we're all excited, we've got a new project from our manager, and we just start coding. So the first thing we're going to start with here is a part class. Makes sense? We have 6 properties. We have the part number, the name, the description, the quantity, the bin, and the reorder level. So this was specified to us in our application specification, and we've just done that. And then we've set up a new initializer in it with number, name, description, quantity, bin, and reorder level. And the implementation of this is very simple. We synthesize our properties, and then in the init method, we just call up to super's init method and make sure that we have self. And if we do, then we just set the properties depending on what we pass in to this initializer. And then we return self. Okay, so this is a very simple implementation of a part class, an abstract part. Let's look at inventory. Inventory, we know, is basically the locations that we can have and the parts in each. So we've set up a property here. First of all, inventory is derived from NSObject. We could derive it directly from NS Mutable Dictionary or NS Dictionary, but let's just keep things simple so that we don't have to subclass NS Mutable Dictionary and get into all of the requirements of doing that. We'll just make it an NSObject, and we'll have a single property called bins. And that's a mutable dictionary because we're going to be adding things into bins and deleting things out of bins eventually and doing a lot of different things with inventory. And so this bins dictionary is going to be changing or mutating a lot. So let's just go ahead and make it a mutable dictionary. And I've got one method here, add part, quantity, and bin, because I've already have the other part detail in part.m in the part class. So all I really need in the inventory is the part number, how many of them I have, and the bin number, right? Makes sense. So far so good. We have an inventory, and then the add part method is here. I want to make sure to create bins if it's not already created, and so I override its getter to do that. If not bins, bins is an NS Mutable Dictionary allocated with an initial capacity of whatever number we want to put there. 10 is pretty good. And then we just return that object. So the add part is we set up an array called part info with the part number and the part quantity. And then we set the object to that part info for the key, and then we give it the bin number. All right, so far so good. We can name any bin we want. We can say a part is in any bin at all, and then as long as we have a bin number, we'll create a record in the inventory dictionary with the key as the bin number, and then the actual part information, the name, the part number and the quantity inside that key. So there we go. We've got our model initially. Okay, so let's look at our storyboard. Now, in order to test our model, we've set up 2 views and 2 view controllers. The first view is just a view controller that has a single button on it called New Part. And this is segued to a new view controller. And that view controller is actually adding view controller. So if we look at this file's owner object, we can see that, and I'll bring this over, we can see that the class is adding view controller rather than just UI view controller. So now let's look at that. Here's my part information. I'm going to be adding a part. Now this is just a test application. We're not going crazy with a beautiful user interface. All we need to do is make sure our part goes into inventory. So we get the part number, the name, and the description, the quantity, the reorder quantity, and the designated bin from the user, and we have an OK button. So let's look at the adding view controllers header file. Now, first of all, I don't want to look at that protocol just yet. First of all, I've got 6 properties that correspond to my outlets. These are all declared as weak because they're outlet properties and they're subviews of the main view. So I've got 5 text fields: the number, the name, the quantity, the reorder, and the bin. And when I set up my properties for, at least for outlets, I like to prepend an abbreviation of what that outlet actually is, what its type is. So these 5, I prepended TF. That stands for text field. In the description, it's a text view, so I prepended TV. So I've got these 6 properties. They're outlet properties, and they're bound each to their respective areas, or their respective fields. Now, and I've wired them up. Now, I've got a couple of dismiss keyboard actions here. A text field dismisses its keyboard, or should dismiss its keyboard, in that text field's did end on exit method. But a text view doesn't have a did end on exit method, and we have to do something different. So all we've done in the dismiss keyboard is, if I hit the done key in the keyboard on the text field, it will dismiss the keyboard by calling sender resign first responder. However, this one, to dismiss the keyboard on the text view, in order to get to that, I'm going to actually bind this method to a text field's did click, I believe. It's let's look at that. Actually the text field's touchdown method. And that is just going to resign first responder on this text view object. So now if we look at this adding view controller's wiring, here's my outlet properties, and then here are my actions. So the did end on exits are resigning first responder on each text field. The touchdowns are resigning the first responder on the view, on the text view. And then I've got a button OK touched, which is just the touch up inside that will actually call the delegate method that I'm passing back to my main view controller. So let's look at that. Button OK touched, we need to call a delegate method, and that delegate method is called user. Here, we'll get that. User did add part number, name, description, quantity, read order, and bin. All of these are strings except for 2 NSU integers, unsigned integers, the quantity and the reorder. They should be unsigned because I don't ever want a negative quantity or a negative reorder amount. So if we go back to our view controller, I'll save the storyboard. We'll go back to our view controller. I'm sorry. Our adding view controller. I convert the quantity and the reorder amount to an integer value before I call the delegate method user did add part number and so forth. And then I just pass the texts of the text fields and the text view, the description, and then my new quantity and reorder local variables into that delegate method. Now the view controller brings in adding view controller as well as part and inventory. It brings in adding view controller so that it can adopt its delegate. And then when I prepare for the segue, we'll go there. When I prepare for the segue, I check and see if my segue is equal to the adding string, which is what I set for that segue's name, the identifier. And then I make an adding view controller, adding VC, by downcasting segue destination view controller to an adding view controller type. And then I set adding VC's delegate to this class. There we go. That's all you do. And so when we get to user did add part number, blah, 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 I can uncomment this log just to see that I'm getting the right values, and I am. Then I want to dismiss that modal view controller that we pushed on top of this view controller, so I dismiss it. And then I set up a new part called added part, and I pass in those parameters. And then I call add part quantity and bin on the inventory, and then I'm just logging out inventory bins to make sure my part got added. Okay, so you might be looking at this code and thinking, wait a minute, what are we going to do with this part? Well, right now, nothing. So this is kind of a red flag. I mean, we set the inventory values. Here we have the part in inventory, but this piece of code here doesn't really seem to do much at all. What are we going to do with that part? I've got a part, but right now, when this method gets to the end of its execution, this part, added part, is either going to be leaked or it's just going to go away if I set it to nil, right? So what good is this added part? Well, once again, as I said at the beginning, we've kind of jumped into coding our model before we were really ready to do so. Maybe we don't need a discrete part class. Maybe what we do is we put this part into a part catalog of some kind. Maybe we need to create the part, but create it in a way that it doesn't have a retain count. And then when we add it to some kind of part catalog model object, the part catalog retains it and the part goes away. So we have not made some decisions that we needed to make before we sat down and begun coding. So as we go through, we're going to correct this however we correct it, but first we have to go back to the drawing board and think about where in our model does the actual underlying information for a part need to reside. What do we do with this part object, in other words? But it goes into inventory and we're logging out inventory bins. So let's see what happens. So we have our initial display, and here we go, and we can click the new part button. So this brings up this interface. Now let's enter a part number. Let's just call this, for simplicity, PN0008. And in its name, let's just call it a part. And we can put in the description, my first part. And then when we click on quantity, watch the keyboard go away on the text view and then come back for the quantity. It happened pretty quick. Let's put 100 in at the beginning. And then for reorder, let's say when we get down to 10, we want to reorder the part. And then let's give it a bin. Let's just say this bin is in the parts room, so PR 010. All right. We click done, the keyboard is dismissed, and we'll click OK. We can see that when we log out that inventory bins, we see our bin, 0 and 0, our part number, and our quantity. So pretty good. So far, so good. Now let's keep going. So let's add a new part, new bin, new part. Let's just do this. Let's call this one a NZ999, and its name is another part, and its description is some other part, and its quantity, let's get 150 of those. We'll use them a lot. It's reorder quantity. When we get down to 30 of those, we want to make sure we reorder, and let's give it a different bin number. Again, in the parts room, PR005, and we'll click done, and we'll click OK. So now we see we have a key, PR005 and PR010, and here's our part number and a quantity for each. All right, so our dictionary is building and it looks good. Let's do something else. Let's add another part to the PR005 bin. So our part number is PJ002. Name, not much imagination today. Its description is a third part. Quantity, let's get 200 of those. And when we get down to 5, we'll reorder them. And the bin, we wanted to put that back in PR005. Okay, and we click that, and we say OK, and we log out, and look what happened. What was in PR005 before was replaced with the new part. This might be good, it might be bad, but at least we want an alert that says you're going to replace all the parts in this bin with another. Or let's say if we were out on the assembly line, we would want to be sending many different parts actually to one bin that manufacturers or that line workers parts bin to make an assembly. So this is probably bad. So we found two problems with our model code so far. First of all, what do we do with that part object once it's created? And secondly, is there a way to have more than one part in the same inventory bin? And what are the business rules that we need to wrap around that so that we replace what's in one bin with the contents of another bin? Can we move parts in our inventory? We should be able to. How can we have more than one kind of part in the same bin? So these are things that we really should have thought up when we were graphing our model. But if we didn't think of them, a simple user interface can expose these problems early on. So this is why I always say, as you're developing the model, test the model with very simple log statements and user interface constructs like we've done here. Thank you very much.